bit of music. You're listening to The Book Show. You're listening to Shannon Davey on The Book Show, and we're discussing the vast idea that, or the vast ideas that are in his book, Discover the Spirit of Tasmania and Western Civilisation. This is The Book Show. You're listening to Edge Radio, and back in a moment for some more of this discussion. When I started doing the show, my first question to the authors often was, so what's your book about? Until I started listening to that question and thinking how, I suppose, how ignorant or simplistic it sounded at the beginning of the interview. But I'm going to have to ask, this is a big book that for me roams over a lot of territory. It's so much territory, so I am seeking your assistance in this. Can you summarise what your book is about?
Yes, it does cover a lot of territory, but that's based on the idea that life, the universe, if you like, is holistic, is just one, and one system, and everything happens within that one system. And so even though it might look like there's different stories in there, that there are through lines that go through that from one end of the book to the other.
What are those through lines?
Well, the main one is the evolution of values. So, and how that affects people's behaviour and the way history has evolved. It's almost looking like let's say, on one level it's a history of Tasmania and a look to the future. But deeper, it's saying, well, what values have determined that history, and what behaviours have determined the history, and what are the thought processes behind the behaviours that have determined history. Because we get a lot of the story nowadays about, you hear it all the time in politics, we've got to have more of our Judeo-Christian background in school curriculum and all this, and I listen to those guys and I think, well, do they really know? Because I know very well they're grabbing it as a political tool, and they're saying, oh yeah, well, that'll mean more people will vote for us, if we have that, because that's got to be conservative, right-wing, politics and that. But it's not like that at all.
Okay. Yeah. So we've got the history of Tasmania and the evolution of values. Are there any of these other through lines that you can?
Well, based on that, the outworking of that, and it starts off with our relationship with the first people of the land, Indigenous people, convicts, and the tensions that are built up there, because the value there, and I start off about the 1700s in Britain with a class system where people are not equal. So the value is upper class people have value, and others, whoever they might be,
I just need to explain to the listener, there are inverted commas being expressed in the studio right now.
Yeah.
The others,
others, whether they be slaves, Aboriginal, Indigenous people, working class people, don't have human rights. They are second class citizens. So that explains those treatments of the colonial invasion of Ireland and the treatment of Ireland. I mean, it's blatant, they weren't treated as human beings. And the same with Aborigines out here. So that is progressed forward till now, like with the reconciliation movement around Aboriginal, our whole integrity as a nation, it is still in its infancy in as far as our reconciliation goes there. But there's certain key ideas that have come out in the non-conformist movements. It starts with the church. The establishment church were pro-slavery and pro making a profit and pro, quite corrupt. And then you've had people like Wesley, and I deal with Wesley. There were other players there, but I deal with Wesley who came and said, well, everyone's equal. He interpreted Jesus from way back and said, well, hang on, if you love each other, that means people are equal. So where's that in society?
Yeah. So can we just come back to when the Wesleyan ideal came to Tasmania, and did it change much on the ground at that?
It's slowly.
So when was that?
Well, it manifested in quite a few different ways. He influenced Wilberforce to stop slavery.
Yeah.
And so the Americans, this was only incidental, America was no longer an option for Britain to send their slaves to, so they were sent here. The convicts were sent here as slaves. So I use the term slaves and convicts interchangeably.
It's great to hear it said like that. Yeah.
My background schooling was, that they were all these rogues, but it's quite clearly a result of being dressed as the Enclosure Acts and so forth, second-class citizens, forced to be refugees in their own land. So with Wesley, there's 4 or 5 different things. So he precipitated the anti-slavery movement. The last letter he ever wrote was to William Wilberforce.
Yep.
And Wilberforce had a fight on his hand against the church establishment and the political establishment and the economic establishment to take on slavery and get rid of it, but eventually did. And Wesley also influenced Lord Shaftesbury to work against labour in factories and exploitation in the factories, the Dickens's satanic mills and all that. There is a direct link with Tasmania in that Wesley also began the Methodist movement, and the Methodist movement interpreted the Bible in 2 ways. They took personal salvation, but they also took social justice really seriously. Yeah. And that transformed British society. It stopped them having a French Revolution. Yep. And it 6 Methodist preachers thought that in order to feed their family, they would form a union. And the government sent them, or the leader sent they were all sent to Australia, but George Lovelace, the leader, was sent here and they became the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
Yes. Now, before we go on to that, because that's a fascinating story in itself, which is this beautiful, rich connection between the origins of the Union movement and Van Diemen's Land, or was that Van Diemen's Land, I think, still at that point?
18 years.
So we'll go to a little